Whenever you're ready, John. We're good? Okay, great. Thanks. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, rather. I'm coming to you today from the Press Theatre on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. And I'm joined in person by Peter Brack, the Executive Director of Operations for Emergency Management BC in Vancouver, Minister of Public Safety Mike Farnworth. Also on the telephone is Rick Manwaring, the Deputy Minister of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, and Ian Mayer, the Executive Director for the BC Wildfire Service. We're all, of course, available to answer your questions, but I just want to open with a few comments and reflections on the past week here in British Columbia. All of us, of course, have been shocked to see the images of people fleeing the wildfires now raging in Lytton, the Fraser Canyon, and beyond. And of course, our primary concern is always to protect lives, to ensure that we're doing everything we can to evacuate safely and to fight the fires at the same time. I want to particularly thank the Mayor of Lytton, Jan Polderman, who was on the ground smelling smoke and then seeing within minutes his town engulfed in flames. The leadership of Councillor John Horgan of the Lytton First Nations also needs to be acknowledged at this time, as the members of his nation have been scattered in various directions to find safety. We're working together to make sure that everyone can coordinate the efforts of bringing people back together. Of course, I always want to thank the firefighters who are bravely fighting fires all across British Columbia, many of them from Lytton, who do not know at this moment what's happening in their community, what's happening to their homes. And to those individuals, my heart goes out to them. You have the support of all British Columbians as we enter into a very early and very intense fire season here in British Columbia. To all of those who provided food and shelter so far in Lytton, in Merritt, in Boston Bar, Chilliwack, Kamloops, and many other communities, I want to thank you. There's nothing more Canadian in my mind than offering help and assistance when our neighbours need it. Our thoughts are with those who have been evacuated. I know how deeply disconcerting and disorienting it can be to be taken from your homes in a moment's notice, as was the case in Lytton, without being aware of what's happening to your neighbors and your friends. And of course, Lytton has had overlapping challenges in the past number of days. We can never forget that we are in still a global pandemic, but we have had record heat as a result of a heat dome. 3 consecutive days of the highest recorded temperatures in Canadian history all happened in Lytton this week. And of course, to have a heat wave and then a horrific fire is just so troubling and so challenging for the people in the community. My heart goes out to them. I spoke with the mayor this morning, and again, the resilience of British Columbians, the resilience of those who live in rural BC and face the threats of fires on an annual basis when it comes so close to home, and in fact, when it completely eliminates your main street. Nothing is more important than holding together and having all British Columbians thinking and being concerned, and also offering the help that we can to make sure that we all get through this together. There is an incident management team on the ground supporting emergency efforts, and of course, Peter and Minister Farnworth will be able to answer questions around that. The fire origin and cause investigations are underway. We do not yet know what started the fire in Lytton. I think it's important to separate the wildfire that was being battled to the southeast of Lytton and the fire that engulfed the city. These are 2 separate fires. There was little or no time to warn the community. In fact, it was the mayor himself that got the first whiff of challenge, and within minutes, as he said to me this morning, within minutes, the city was engulfed. So again, I lift my hands to all of those who moved so rapidly to get to safety. Following the directions of local governments and first responders is absolutely critical in situations like this. And I encourage all British Columbians, as we continue to go through what will be a hot, dry summer, to pay attention. Make sure when you hear a public service announcement that you understand that it could be directly affecting you. Don't change the dial on your radio. Listen to what's going on in your community. When the smoke clears in Lytton, of course, the province will be there to rebuild. Made that commitment to the mayor today, and I make that commitment to those who are in emergency centres around the region today. Your government will be there, and I had the opportunity to speak with the Prime Minister this morning, and he too reinforced the federal government's desire to be there to help the people of Lytton specifically, and of course to offer any services British Columbia needs as we go through the next number of weeks and potentially months of intense firefighting. And it's always grateful. I'm always grateful to have the collaboration of the federal government. I regret to say that this is the third of 5 years of horrific fires in my time in this job, and to have a federal government that has been able to learn with us on how we do our best to adapt to what is a climate change environment where we are going to see increasing high temperatures for long periods of time, increasingly intense fire seasons. To have two orders of government working with Indigenous peoples, working with local governments to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect people is a great comfort to me. And I realize that these times of insecurity and uncertainty, that's little comfort, but I believe all British Columbians, indeed all Canadians, are well served when we all work together to protect people in times of crisis. In the last 24 hours, 62 new fires have started in British Columbia. Deputy Minister Manwaring will talk in more detail about what that means when the questions start. 29,000 lightning strikes in the past 24 hours. And although we've seen a reduction in heat here on the coast, it is still intensely hot as you get into Kamloops and into the Rockies, and then, of course, into Alberta, where the heat will be moving. I cannot stress enough how extreme the fire risk is at this time in almost every part of British Columbia. And I urge British Columbians to listen carefully to officials in your communities and follow those directions as best you can. Firefighters are putting their lives on the line to protect us. Let's not add to their frustration. Let's not add to their challenges by being the result of a fire starting. We can't do anything about lightning strikes, but we can do something about our personal behavior, and I urge all British Columbians to be very cautious when they're out and about in the forests. There will be, of course, closures in many areas, certainly around Lillooet right now. There will be no backcountry activity. There will be no economic activity. We want people to stay out of the woods until we get to a place where we see more precipitation and a better opportunity to get back to normal behavior. Lastly, I just want to say how much gratitude I have for Emergency Management BC, for the BC Wildfire Service, who prepare annually for these events that we're going into, and most graphically demonstrated by the events in Lytton over the past 24 hours. But this is an annual event for many people, and we have the most skilled and prepared firefighters in the country. We have asked for more capacity, more resources from across the country, but this is a challenging time. We're hopeful that many of those who we have helped in the past will be there to help us today. The requests have been made. As I said, the federal government, the Prime Minister stands ready to send in resources, whether it be the Canadian military or others, to help, and it's a great comfort to know that we're all going to be working on this together. And with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I'll pass it on to Minister Farnworth in Vancouver, and he'll give us a breakdown of how Emergency Management BC is dealing with evacuations, and then we can get into questions for Deputy Minister Manwaring and others.
Thank you, Premier. I'm Mike Farnworth. Good afternoon, the Solicitor General, Minister of Public Safety, and I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. This has been a very difficult day, and the days ahead are going to continue to challenge us. There are several fires of note burning through the province, putting our communities at risk. Of these fires, the one affecting Lytton and surrounding areas has been catastrophic for that community. The fire started yesterday, and the cause is under investigation. This fire moved aggressively and continues to do so, burning through the extreme conditions that have resulted from the record heat in the area. Last night, around 1,000 people were evacuated with support from the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, Emergency Management BC, and the RCMP. I want to commend the work of the Mounties and others involved in the evacuation, putting themselves at great risk to help move residents out quickly. The Lytton Fire Department has been supported in their structural protection efforts by the Office of the Fire Commissioner, the BC Wildfire Service, and fire departments in the surrounding areas. from Boston Bar, Spence's Bridge, Ashcroft, and Merritt. Despite these brave efforts, I have reports that most homes and structures in the village, as well as the ambulance station and the RCMP detachment, have been lost. I also understand that some residents have not been accounted for, and their location is currently being investigated by the RCMP. My condolences to the entire community. We are here to support. Because of the urgency of this evacuation, many residents left the area in various directions and are now in Lillooet, Ashcroft, Spence's Bridge, Merritt, 100 Mile House, Kamloops, and several other communities. Evacuee reception centers have been established in communities such as Kamloops, Chilliwack, Kelowna, and Merritt. More locations are currently being established. Given the widespread areas to which people have evacuated from the fire in Lytton and others, many are being identified and registered through the online evacuee registration tool. Any evacuee requiring immediate assistance with accommodations, food, medical, or prescription support should seek it at a local emergency social services reception center. But if you have been evacuated, whether or not you need support, register right away at the ess.gov.bc.ca so that we know where you are and that you are safe. We've faced enormous challenges with wildfires in the last few years, and this year is proving no different. As the Premier noted, the most important that the public can do is to prepare yourself and your family for any potential fires in your areas and avoid any and all activity that may result in a wildfire. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And with that, I know there'll be questions. As I say, we have content experts here to assist with any of the details, or Minister Farnworth or I can take it from there. But over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press star 1 to enter the queue. You'll be limited to one question and one follow-up. First question today is from Keith Baldry, Global News.
Oh, hi there. Premier, we're now in step 3, which has, and has had, even in step 2, the advice, you've actually requested people to travel BC, get out and visit your local communities. Given, as you describe it, the extreme risk right now, should British Columbians be advised not to do that, not to travel, particularly in parts of the interior?
Well, certainly, that's a very good question. We, of course, were preparing as a government to get to step 3. I think British Columbians were anxious for us to get to that place. We laid out the roadmap some weeks ago. Of course, the heat dome arrived last Friday and overwhelmed so many communities, so many individuals, despite efforts by local health authorities to make sure that all of the appropriate measures were in place. Despite that, when you have record temperatures, when you're not prepared for it, this is not how we usually roll in a temperate rainforest. What we have asked people to do as part of step 3 is to check with local communities before you travel, and that remains in place. And of course, if you were planning on doing backcountry activities, you're not going to be wanting to go where there's an intense fire warning. We are still encouraging people to get out as the temperatures cool, and hopefully we see more precipitation. There has been, and Deputy Manwaring can give more details, almost down to the millimeter of how precipitation is affecting our challenges. The Northwest looks pretty good right now. The challenges certainly into the interior down through Kelowna. So if you are traveling to the Okanagan, we want you to be absolutely focused on not being the person responsible for the starting of a wildfire. I think that we can continue to travel, but we need to do what Dr. Henry has always advised us to do. Check before you go. Make sure that you're well prepared when you get there, and be mindful of your circumstances. The circumstances right now are an extreme high fire warning in various parts of the interior. I think people need to be aware of that. There's numerous opportunities to access information through the Government of BC website, and I encourage people to do that before they go anywhere.
Follow-up, Keith?
Yes, for Minister Farnworth, the Premier mentioned about potential of the Canadian Army coming to BC if things get out of hand. Do you envision, you just ended a state of emergency, Mr. Farnworth, for COVID-19. Do you envision, or do you suspect that you could very well have to invoke another declaration of an emergency, state of emergency, because of the wildfire situation?
Thanks for that question. I can tell you in regards to the federal government, I've already spoken with the defense minister, and I will be having a conversation. I'll be talking with Minister Bill Blair, my counterpart federally, later this afternoon on resources that the federal government may have available or will be able to help here in British Columbia. In terms of with regards to the state of emergency, absolutely, we may well, depending on how the fire season starts to unfold, require a provincial state of emergency, such as we have seen in past fire seasons in this province. So that may very well have to be implemented.
Next question is from Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Yeah, thank you. What is the plan for dealing with the immediate crisis in Lake versus the ongoing threat from several other wildfires in BC? Just moments ago, there was an evacuation order issued in the Caribou, up to 700 people at Deca Lake. So how are all of these emergencies going to be triaged in terms of resources and priorities as they're happening simultaneously?
Thank you, Tanya, for the question. I'll ask Deputy Minister Manwaring to give you an answer to that. I will just preface it by saying that the BC Wildfire Service, Emergency Management BC, are very adept at managing multiple fires in different regions of the province. We have a volunteer backbone of people who go to pre-ox, as they're called, and I'll let Rick explain that to you. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, thank you, Premier. It's a good question. As the Premier stated, as we begin to see more and more fires around the province, and we experience fire growth, what we begin by doing is putting area closures around these fires and restricting activities so that we can protect our first responders, but also remove the risk to the general public and the activities that are going on in the forest. When these fires begin to, as you outlined, create a challenge in the interface for communities and people living in rural BC in particular, we begin to involve setting up evacuation alerts and then evacuation orders. And we do that in partnership with local governments and implement those, and you'll begin to see those as these fires create threat around the province. So those orders and those fires can be viewed on our provincial website, and you can see them. The boundaries will appear, and with Emergency Management BC, and you'll be able to see what those look like, where they're developing, and how we're managing those. So we take an abundance of caution in putting alerts and orders in place, and really important for us as we track these fires to be quite proactive with these. So what you've seen in terms of Deca Lake was an extreme cautionary measure and necessary in this situation.
Tanya, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Thanks. Premier, you said you spoke with the Prime Minister today. We understand foreign firefighters may be coming to Canada to assist. Do you have any details on that and what the request is for BC in particular, and I suppose in the wider context of what our current capacity is with resources versus the anticipated need through the rest of the summer?
Well, again, I'll pass that on to Rick, but my understanding is that we have sufficient resources to deal with the fires today. But as I said, 62 new fires in the past 24 hours. There is a mutual aid agreement across the country where we move resources from province to province as required, making requests for additional resources when needed. Rick can give you the details on that. And with respect to those who have historically come from other jurisdictions, we are in a global pandemic, and we need to weigh who's been vaccinated, who hasn't. All of those issues come into play that further complicate what will be a challenging year. But Rick could talk to you specifically about how we apportion resources across the country when needed. I will say, just to clarify, when the Prime Minister and I spoke about resources, it was not so much those to actually directly fight the fires, but to assist with evacuations, to assist with management of logistics, which of course the Canadian Armed Forces are adept at. But over the past 3 years, it's also important to note that the federal government has now turned its efforts to developing capacity to fight fires greater than they had in 2017, 2018. And that is also, again, I think a response, an appropriate response by the other order of government to say, well, if we're called upon, let's give the greatest amount of help we possibly can, which means training our military personnel to do different things. And that, I think, is something we're going to become accustomed to in an era of climate change, as we need to have our public servants who don a uniform every day have a diverse set of skills so that they can help Canadians, whether it be here or abroad. So you want to answer the specifics about foreign resources, Rick? And perhaps how we manage the system across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good question. I'll just talk about British Columbia for the moment. The Premier is correct. We planned well for this fire season. In the last 24 hours, one of the good, pieces of information or news for us is along with the lightning that the Premier mentioned earlier, we received some pretty appreciable rainfall, I'd say, in the north half of the province with that. And what that's allowing us now to do is to flow resources, wildfire fighting resources, our staff, from the north of the province into the south. So you'll begin to see that. That's already underway. And that's really helpful at this point in time. As the Premier mentioned, we've got a national agreement in place under the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre. It's a partnership with all the provinces and territories. And we've put in a resource request, just anticipating that we might need some more resources. So resources like incident management teams, we're looking for a couple down the road, 4 sustained action crews, and additional resources from across Canada, and we're expecting to see that fulfilled. We're pretty confident right now on the aircraft resource side. We prepared well for that, have very good air attack resources in place for the province right now. But as Minister Farnworth mentioned, we are putting in or have put in a resource ask request formally with the federal government. And our initial focus there will be on aircraft resources, which will help us move personnel and assist Emergency Management BC should we get into any challenging situations going forward. Part of our agreement with the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre is also our international agreements with partners. So they are working right now, and because they work on behalf of other provinces as well, to try and see what resources are available from our traditional partners, for example, like Australia and Mexico. And I will mention as part of this, if we do have resources coming into BC, we've got rapid testing protocols in place for COVID to ensure the safety of everyone coming in and everyone here that we may use in the firefighting effort.
Next question is from Derek Penner, Vancouver Sun.
Hi. Yeah, you mentioned that the causes are still under investigation. We have been hearing reports that the fire that struck Lytton might have been caused by a train moving through the community. Could someone come and respond to that initial report?
Well, I certainly have anecdotal information, Derek, that's consistent with what you just said, but that's why we have response teams that do these investigations. And as soon as we have the information about how this fire started, we'll make that public. We're at the preliminary stages of investigations now. Again, I've spoken to leaders in the community, the local MLA. I've spoken to the mayor. I've spoken to the leader of the Lytton First Nation and surrounding communities as well. And I think right now everyone's focused on making sure that everyone's safe and everyone is cared for as we go through the next number of days. But we have professionals on the ground doing their investigations, and as soon as we have an answer, we'll get it to you.
Follow up, Derek?
Minister Farnworth mentioned there are individuals unaccounted for. Could you perhaps talk about what you know about how many people are unaccounted for, and have you heard any reports of injuries?
What I can tell you at this point is that because the fire hit so fast, people evacuated very quickly. and about 1,000 people. We do know that there are some people who as yet are unaccounted for. The RCMP, Red Cross are working to ensure as many people as that we are able to identify quickly where people are. That's why it's important for people to register at the site. In terms of any injuries, we have no confirmation on anything yet at this point.
Next question is from Caden Fanshawe, CKPG.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for taking my question. I just wanted to ask, I guess just to build on the COVID factor here, is there any concern about having large camps as these fires get bigger, still with our, we are in a global pandemic?
Well, I think I'll pass that to you, Rick, because you've got protocols in place, have for last season and this season, so why don't you take that one?
Actually, Premier, I'll ask the Exec Director for Wildfire, Ian Meyer, to step in. Ian's got experience with our deployments into the U.S. last year, and he built the plan this year for COVID safety. So, Ian, I'll let you answer this one.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, COVID safety in our fire camp situation is a concern. We have protocols in place that we tested last year. We also went into California and Oregon and learned a lot from them and how they manage their camp situation. We have been able to shift how we put our camps together to keep the numbers down and be able to split off into smaller pods with our firefighters to keep it manageable. And as Rick mentioned earlier, we do have rapid testing in place, and we're working very closely with the Ministry of Health and all the health authorities for support if needed. So we have the ability to break our camps down into 3 different sizes and be able to manage the numbers to keep it safe for everyone.
Caden, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just wanted to go back to to Lytton. I'm just wondering, is there any timeline on when we might know better if how many people remain missing, or if that is the case here? Just wondering on a timeline on that.
Well, I'll say, Caden, as quickly as possible. When I spoke to John Horgan of the acting chief of the Lytton First Nation, his concern was that his members went in 3 different directions. People scattered, as Minister Farnworth said, and so not all would have attended a evacuation center. Many would have found friends to stay with, and so reporting when you're not in your community will assist us in absolutely clarifying those that are not yet accounted for. But again, it will take time. The investigation of the cause will take time. And we're focused right now on making sure that we are tracking individuals based on knowledge pre-evacuation. And that involves a bit of detective work and a bit of good luck, quite frankly, because if you're fleeing your community, try and imagine that. There's only 3 ways out of Lytton. And so once you leave, where do you go? What have you left behind? There's a lot of trauma going on right now, and we don't want to add to that. We want to reduce that as best we can.
Next question is from Ashley Wadwani, Black Press.
Hi, yeah. So my first question has to do with some of those missing people. I understand that we don't know quite how many, or we can't speak to that right now, but we've been hearing from lots of people who are looking for their loved ones or haven't heard from them. What steps should they be taking if at this point we're nearing, almost 24 hours, if they haven't heard from their loved ones? Where should they be going to give that information to police?
I'll pass that one to you, Mike, or Minister Farnworth.
Thank you. What you can do is contact the local police, plus the emergency social services centers in the communities that you're closest to. And I'll also ask my deputy Tara if there's anything else that they should be doing as well.
Ashley, sorry.
We're going to go to Peter here at the. So come on in.
Yeah, thank you. Peter Brock, EMBC. Just wanted to reiterate that that is the best course of action right now, contacting local police. In addition to reaching out to your family and friends, we know there's a lot of efforts on that part. We do have Canadian Red Cross engaged, and they're working very hard to set up a line here that will be put out public here shortly. We're hoping as soon as possible, so we understand the need and we recognize the importance of that question. Thank you.
Ashley, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry, I didn't catch if anyone specifically from BC Wildfire Service is here today, but I'm hoping to get some updates as to what exactly is happening when it comes to fighting the fire. We understand that this morning it was the northwest flank that was priority, involving ground crews, but I couldn't get confirmation on anything up in the air. I'm just looking for confirmation on then what aspects of the fire are being focused on right now, what's had any success, if it's grown past the 8,000 hectares from this morning due to the dry and windy conditions, that sort of thing.
So, Ian, Mayor, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Yeah, the fire has grown. It's roughly 9,000 hectares in size at this time. As you could probably appreciate, the fluidness of the situation, we have an incident management team and resources. The incident management team is on the ground and working and coming up with plans to disperse our resources onto the fire. We do have aircraft assigned to that fire, rotary wing, and we also support our ground crews with the fixed wing aircraft as needed out of Kamloops. So we do have the resourcing. Now with the size and the volatility, it is really about protecting the values and coming up with a solid plan going forward, because this is going to be a long haul with this fire.
Next question is from Colton Davies, Radio NL.
Thanks for doing this today. Minister Farnworth said a few minutes ago that we might need to extend the state of emergency for wildfires that we're now seeing. There's dozens of fires burning. The fire risk is extreme in many parts of the province, and thousands of people, as we know, are evacuated from their homes right now. And I don't know if we've seen a wildfire season this extreme this early in the year. I'm just curious, if this isn't a provincial emergency, what qualifies one?
Go ahead, Mike.
What I said, so the current state of emergency expired, has been expired. So how it works is you get a local state of emergency is declared, then assessments are made in terms of province-wide and the resources that are required. If additional significant resources or it's beyond the capability of what is happening on the ground at the local level, then the province can move to the step of declaring a provincial state of emergency. As I've said, that's something that is done on the advice that I receive from the experts within my ministry and the people on the ground. It's not done on the basis of a political decision. So at the appropriate time, on the advice of the experts in my ministry and the fire service, that would be at the point then that I would make a declaration of a province-wide state of emergency.
Colton, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please, and thanks for that technical answer. I was just also curious if you think, do we need stronger legislation to account for extreme heat? Say, for example, if the temperature hits 45 degrees Celsius, since we've seen it now as of this week, should campfires be automatically banned? And perhaps would rail traffic have to make changes, or would backcountry use have to automatically be banned? I'm just curious, perhaps, if Minister Farnworth or the Premier has any thoughts on that.
Well, I certainly do, Colton, and thank you very much. I think what we've learned, certainly what I've learned in my time to have the privilege of being the Premier, is that we are in a changing environment, and climate change is affecting all of our lives in meaningful ways. It's graphic when you see the record temperatures that we've experienced in every corner of British Columbia. We're seeing that move now into Alberta and perhaps across the country. We need to amend how we behave. The Prime Minister and I talked at some length about this today, about our ability to adapt here in Canada, which has traditionally been known as a rather cool climate. where we have heat extremes in local areas, but nothing like what we've experienced this year, and quite frankly, in previous years. I've been in consultation with leaders in the Yukon just as recently as yesterday. Again, when we see permafrost disappearing, these are signals that we can't ignore. We have to, as a nation, and the Prime Minister fully agrees, redouble our efforts to make sure that the international community takes the steps that we need. We are 5 million people in British Columbia in a sea of 7 billion souls, and we all have to be pulling together on this. Do we need to make changes in British Columbia? Yes, we do. We've been doing that through our Clean BC plan for the past 4 years, and we will continue to adapt as more information becomes graphically available to us, like the heats that we've seen, and of course the horrific tragedy that's been beset upon the good people of Lytton.
We have time for one more question today. Hina Lam, Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister and Premier. Thank you for this. I was wondering if you can tell me a little bit about the damage in Lytton. We've been hearing that about 90% of the town has been damaged. I was wondering if you have any more details on that.
Well, I'll start with that, and perhaps, I don't know if, Rick, you have a better assessment. I spoke with the mayor this morning, who was just traumatized by events and how quickly they happened. I've looked at Google Earth references. I'm sure that the media have more ability to get these images on their people's television screens and in the hours ahead. But if you look at Google Earth images of Main Street in Lytton last week and then compare it to today, I think it tells you everything you need to know. I can't give an indication of the number of buildings that have been lost, but it is substantial. And perhaps, Rick, you might be able to quantify that. But I think suffice it to say, to the people of British Columbia, Lytton has been devastated, and it will take an extraordinary amount of effort to get that historic location back to what it was, and we're all in to make sure that happens, as is the federal government.
Yeah, thank you, Premier. It's Rick. As the Minister mentioned earlier in the call, getting into the community is a challenge, and safety is a significant factor. We do know there's significant damages you've outlined in the community, but we don't want to put a number on the number of structures that have been damaged at this point until we've had a chance for a thorough and accurate assessment. And that's about as far as I think I can go on it right now.
Hina, do you have a follow-up?
I do, thank you. I was wondering if you can also tell me what are the places where the community has gathered, because we know that they've spread out all over the place, but are there any centers specifically where people have been gathering, and which ones are these? How many are there? And how far are they from Lytton?
Mike, I'll ask Peter to respond to that on behalf of Emergency Management BC.
Yes, thank you for the question. So just want to mention evacuees, as mentioned previously, went a lot of different places when they had left very promptly. And so those places included Lillooet, Ashcroft, Spence's Bridge, and even 100 Mile. EMBC did set up reception centers and engage with local communities throughout BC to try to manage the various places that they went to. Evacuee reception centers have actually been established in Kamloops, Chilliwack, Kelowna, and Merritt. And so right now, one of the biggest challenges, of course, due to the real rapid movement of people out of that community, is to determine exactly where they are. But that's just an example of some of the communities. To your question, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And I'll just throw back to Minister Farnworth to supplement that, if you could, Mike.
Yeah, no, thank you, Premier. And in response to that question that Colton asked about the 45 degrees in temperature, one of the things that's currently underway in government and in my ministry with Emergency Management BC is a complete overhaul and rewrite of the Emergency Program Act, much of which was constructed around fire and flood. But as we've seen in this past year, with the pandemic and with the the recent heat waves, that those are emergencies also that we're likely to see more of in the future. So the work is ongoing to incorporate lessons from all of those things on how we can make significant improvements and changes and deal with these kinds of events in a way that we have never had to deal before. So there is significant work underway, and I expect that work to be completed for the fall and for early next year.
Thanks, Mike, and thank the media for participation today. I want to thank the employees here at the press gallery who came together on what is a stat holiday so that we can inform the public about events as they're unfolding. I hope that people can take the next number of hours and reflect upon the benefits of being Canadian on Canada Day, but also to reflect on the challenges in our history. Certainly, the events at Tk'emlúps and Secwépemc territory brought graphically home to us the challenges that we have faced in our history with respect to residential schools, but we also need to know the intergenerational trauma that is a result of that. I had the good fortune of being in a little community called Lower Post yesterday in the Kaska territory in northern British Columbia, where I gratefully participated in the demolition of the last vestiges of the residential school in that community. And although it was the day before Canada Day, the community was in unison in celebrating that we can make positive change when we listen to each other, when we acknowledge the failings of our past, whether it's the Chinese head tax, whether it's turning away the Komagata Maru, whether it be saying to Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany that they should go away. We have a checkered past as a nation, but we have a proud future ahead of us. If we recognize our diversity, we embrace it, we listen to each other, and we celebrate the benefits of being Canadian. And that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my Canada Day. And I'm going to also be thinking very much about those in the interior who are not in their homes, those who are looking for loved ones still uncertain. I hope all British Columbians will reflect on the blessings of being here, but also our collective responsibilities to care for each other. Thanks very much.